nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
And what a timely documentary.
Thank you.
What were you doing when you came up with the idea of doing this documentary?
What was I doing? Well, okay. I probably was in film school. I had to be in film school to get the idea of actually doing the story. Now, in film school, I was excited about telling the Reuther story, but it wasn't necessarily a documentary. I started to write a script, actually, and I thought, there's so much drama here, it's a great narrative, so eventually I'm going to get actors involved in it, we're going to do a big Hollywood-style production, because there's just so much, dramatic moments and tension. And then in my senior year at NYU Film School, I started to take a documentary class, and I started to think, well, you know what, there's so much great, photos and interesting things about the brothers. Let me go up to Wayne State University, where the UAW has their collection, and just see, what could be made as far as documentary style. And I opened up the door to this amazing 16mm archive where there were actually film reels of them, speaking and marching and with Dr. King, and it really then turned into a documentary. I mean, it took several years from film school until we actually started getting rolling.
Was this all a revelation to you at that time?
Yeah.
I saw it before.
Never seen that before. I mean, I knew bits and pieces about the family legacy, and I knew that, okay, well, these were, important historical figures, so there must be National Archives footage of them, and maybe CBS has stuff, because they clearly did major things, but I didn't know the UAW was documenting themselves. I mean, that was the thing. These weren't in that vault. It was UAW owned and controlled material. I mean, Walter was smart enough in his presidency, actually before him, because there were, Flint sent down strikes footage. The union movement at that time was smart enough to know that, we want to be able to document what we're doing. We know that the forces against us will be able to show how terrible we're doing things in the media and whatnot. So let's document our own bit. We can do our own. I mean, it was propaganda. That's what they were doing. But still, for me as a filmmaker many years later, it's like, oh my God, like what was propaganda at the time, now I can create into this amazing documentary. I mean, it can be almost all archival material we're used, pretty much, aside from those interviews.
Wow.
It's pretty cool.
And it was completed in 2009. So where did it go in 2009?
Well, okay, I mean, it's actually tricky, because 2009 was when we first got recognized by PBS and HBO. We were actually invited to Independent Film Week in New York. That happens once a year, and we were just like a 10-minute teaser at that time. We shot all the footage, we started editing, and I submitted the 10-minute teaser to the Independent Film Week, and we got accepted. So that's when HBO and PBS, we had meetings with them, and they started tracking our progress. That was in 2009. So that number, that date, pops up on IMDb and a bunch of film sites saying that's the year of our production, but we're still not really done yet. We're still a couple months away from being done. So it'll be 2011 really will be our finishing date.
What was it like living with your wonderful, wonderful father, or grandfather?
I mean, I grew up in Washington, D.C., so we didn't really live that far away from them. So, I mean, my early memories are kind of scattered with my grandparents, but, of course I do remember coming to their house on occasional holidays, on occasional weekends, and my grandfather talked his face off. He was constantly telling stories all the time. And at that age, I get sick and tired of hearing the same stories all the time. But then as I began to appreciate, what he was talking about, I mean, these were really dramatic stories.
How old was he at that time when you were really listening to him and understanding what he was saying?
Okay, well then yeah, when I was really understanding what was happening, I was probably in film school, so I was I was 19 or 20 years old, and he had to be probably in his mid-80s at that time, but still sharp as a tack. I mean, up until 92 years old, like literally a month probably or a couple months before he passed away, he was in a retirement home in Georgetown, and in Washington, D.C., Georgetown, and he basically within that retirement home was organizing study groups and groups that would get in and discuss politics, and just getting sort of the elderly community to still keep discussing and talking about this is what we have to do today. I mean, what is he going to go out and do today? He's 92 years old, but he's still organizing them to discuss politics. He couldn't stop. He was like the Energizer Bunny. It was constant for him up until literally his last day.
What audience would not like to see this movie?
Let's see. Well, you know what, to be honest, I don't think, even though many elements in the film, it's, labor versus the corporation, I don't think this film is necessarily an anti-corporation film. I don't think that you can say, the presidents of the big three and the major corporations of the country will be offended by what we're showing. To be honest, I think it's not the corporations that will be offended. I think conservative politicians. I mean, inevitably, I will, hopefully knock on wood if I'm fortunate enough to be on shows and discuss with folks. It'll be the same old, group that comes out against Michael Moore, the same group that comes out against any other progressive filmmakers. It'll be the same story we hear over and over again.
Walter was an amazing, pure visionary.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I run into that same thing. I mentioned at the panel that, if I, at the Q&A, if I hadn't grown up in this family, you're right, I wouldn't have known anything about Reuther's, let alone a lot of labor history in general. It's just not really, it may be in, some high school history books, but, we cover heavily the civil rights movement. Dr. King, big, speeches, I Have a Dream speech and March on Washington. We hear that many times. We see films of that. But we don't really cover the behind the scenes where the civil rights movement was making gains, but they had labor behind them, and there was this interesting, coalition of folks that were all doing this together. And why is it missing from the history books? I just don't think it's fair. Here is a man, a group of brothers and a lot of other labor activists that were doing, important things to build the middle class and were important American figures. It wasn't just about liberalism, it wasn't socialism, they were moving this country forward. They knew how to negotiate with the auto industry, not to crush them, because they knew these are jobs for workers. We want to make sure the industry is doing well, so there'll be more jobs and it'll trickle down, and then those workers will then spend money and boost the economy, and so it goes on the middle class. So why can't you have these folks in history books to talk about them? Like, it's just not fair that, it doesn't seem right that they're kind of washed out of the books. They were very important. You should know about them.
What feelings did you have when you started seeing Governor Walker in Wisconsin taking the steps that they have taken also in Ohio and in Florida and elsewhere? I mean, it's pretty timely with you putting together your documentary, which is so timely and significant.
Yeah, I mean, it was this weird mixture of excitement in knowing, oh my God, my story is that much more timely, and anger. Like, I just could see what was happening, and like, oh my God, now they're just literally dismantling the unions. Like, I could imagine my grandfather, like, he would have hopped out of his 92-year-old skin and ran out there if he could and be with, the folks in Wisconsin. There's no question about it. He would consider this moment like, a pinnacle moment to have, labor has been pushed back on their heels, and now's the time. He would be on, any pulpit he could think of to say, it's now or never for us. Like, we have to figure out a new kind of labor movement, a new coalition. I mean, if it's not,
it's a generational thing.
But you could do this. I mean, I think he's one that would be forward thinking, where he'd be like, look, we don't necessarily have control of the media, but we have independent websites, independent bloggers, independent people that can go out there and organize. Look how many people showed up in Wisconsin. A couple of Facebook sites said, come out on this day, and you had 100,000 people, hundreds of thousands of people out there. So, I mean, he would be excited about that. He would be thinking about, he might not be using the computer himself, but he would understand the power of social media. There's no question about that.
Do you ever feel your uncle, would he be your great uncle?
Walter great uncle, yeah.
Your great uncle leaning over your shoulder?
Oh yeah, that's no
at this
question.
time.
Yep.
You really, it's really absolutely a thing of beauty that you're carrying on the legacy of those three terrifically great Americans. I mean, I'm bamboozled that I have never, ever known that they even existed. Thank you so much.
That's my pleasure. Well, hopefully we won't hear that again. Hopefully from this point on we'll be able to show it.
Two questions.
Yeah.
Is this your first documentary? If not, what else have you done?
Yes, first feature-length documentary. And before that, really a lot of, I was kind of taught in the documentary tradition, but they were all kind of short format things. So I did hired by a lot of music companies and event companies to cover music events. So I did a lot of concert coverage, but documentary style. We'd follow a musician and interview them and do the behind-scene footage and a little bit of archival. So they were basically corporate videos, but they were along the lines of documentary style. So really that's my training, is doing these short format things, and then I've just applied that into doing this longer format.
Once this is in the can, and on HBO or Showtime or all the cable stations, do you have any other plans?
It's funny. I've kind of, hesitated to say exactly what the next project is, only because I want to see who distributes this, because, the industry is tight for independent filmmakers, and it's all about relationships. So if I build a great relationship with PBS or HBO, I kind of want to milk that and keep moving forward with that. So if HBO says, oh, we love what you did with this here, we're going to buy this, do you have other historical documentaries in mind? Then we can go that direction. But I'm not just a documentary guy. Really, I'm interested in doing narrative film projects, even if they're Hollywood style. TV is exciting to me. So, and to be honest, even this film itself, you know, someday in the back of my mind, I will go back to that original script and do a narrative version of this film. I don't know if it'll be the next one, but, you know, it's timely, it might happen, I don't know. I've heard some buzz from folks saying like, well, let's get the documentary in the can and then let's talk seriously about doing a narrative film with actors, and so we'll see.
Sasha, thank you very much.
My
This
pleasure.
is a great treasure
My
to
pleasure.
the American public, especially at this point in time.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sure, it's my pleasure.